Hey guys, thanks for tuning in again. Michael from TechDiffuse here, and in this video I will show you how you can use nested loops in Python. Okay guys, so if you have no idea what a loop is in Python or a loop general in the programming language, I recommend you to watch my other video about loops, where you can learn the basics about loops. So if you once have grasped the concept of a loop, you already know the half of the concept of a nested loop, because a nested loop is nothing else than a loop inside of a loop. Okay, so you might ask yourself now, why do we need a loop inside a loop? Consider that. Sometimes you have a data structure where you have a list inside a list. So this is very much possible. You have a list and one element of the list, for instance, is not an integer, like a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but a list can also hold a list as an element. So for example, you have a list with 3 elements, so index 0, 1 and 2, and in the first list at index 0 is another list with, I don't know, 4 elements. So you have a list 1 at index 0, a list with 4 elements, and in the first list on the second element you have another list, for instance, with 4 elements, and so on. And therefore we need a loop inside a loop to reach those elements. So we iterate over the outer list, which contains other lists, and in the second loop we iterate over the actual list inside the outer list. I know if you first heard of this concept this might be confusing, but let me show you an example in code. Okay, so we start with a very simple list and one single loop that iterates over the elements of those lists. So our list comprises of 4 elements, a simple list from 1 to 3. So we already learned how a list of 1 to 3 can be generated in Python, and we're using the range function here. And here I am also referring to my other video where I explain exactly what the range function is and what it does. We have our for loop, for I in range, and now 1, 2, 4. And as you may remember, the first element of the range is inclusive and the second element is exclusive. So that means we start by 1 and end with 3. Okay, so here we go. We run it and there we have it, 1, 2, 3. So we have 3 loop passes for this very loop. Okay, so far so good. We have one list, our list from 1 to 3, generated with the range function, and we have our print. Let's make it easy and take exactly this for loop and put it inside itself. Okay, so, and for that I'm just copying it, pasting it here, making the indent, and so on, and so we're good. Okay, the first thing you notice is that there is something wrong here. We have the element I underlined. When you have nested loops, the typical thing is that you change the variable names. So for the outer loop, usually we take the I, and for the inner loop, we take the J. Usually we want to print the content of the inner loop. So we print the J here. So let's see what happens. And as you can see, we have printed 3 times 1 to 3. So 1 to 3, 1 to 3, 1 to 3. Okay, so that's interesting. To make it a bit more clear, let's make another print statement after the inner loop. So we make a print statement exactly here. This print statement is executed when the inner loop is done. Okay, so execute and see what happens. So as you can see, we have now 1 to 3, and we have our gap from the print, again 1 to 3, gap, and again 1 to 3. Okay, so what happens here? The outer loop runs 3 times, and the inner loop also runs 3 times. So 3 times 3, and we have 9 elements. So far so good. But the interesting thing is, the outer loop, for the first run of the outer loop, we have 3 runs of the inner loop. So the outer loop has its first run, and for the first run of the outer loop, we have 3 runs of the inner loop, and there we print 1, 2, 3. So once this loop is completed, we have this print statement which still belongs to the outer loop and prints this space, and then the first loop of the outer loop is done. The inner loop is already done 3 times at this point, and the outer loop, its first run is done. So it starts the second run of the outer loop. And in the second run of the outer loop, we have again 3 runs of the inner loop. And again 1, 2, 3. And again a space. And then yet again the outer loop. For the last time, the outer loop, the last run, and 3 runs in the inner loop. Maybe we can make it a bit more clear if we add another variable. So we print the I right before the second inner loop. Okay, we have a print, we have I, and let's just print it here. Okay, so I hope this makes it a bit more clear. As you can see, for every loop pass from the outer loop, we print the value of I. And I is 1, 2, and 3. And these values are the loop passes. And again, loop pass 1, 3 loop passes inside. Loop pass 2, outer loop, 3 loop passes inside. Loop pass 3, outer loop, and 3 passes inside again. We can also create a variable for the inner loop, make it here j, and to make it more clear, for instance, we can change the amount of the loops of the inner loop. So let's assume we have we put here a 3. This means we have only 2 loops, we have only 2 passes inside the inner loop. So let's see what happens. Okay, so we have again 3 loop passes of the outer loop. We have I1, I2, and I3. But now we have only 2 loop passes of the inner loop. So the j is only 1 and 2, and then it finishes. And again, 1 and 2, and it finishes. And yet again, 1 and 2, and it finishes. So this means 3 loop passes outside, 2 loop passes inside. 3 times 2 makes 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's the basic idea of a nested loop. Loop inside a loop. Alright guys, so that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, and don't forget to visit my website TechDiffuse.com, and also join my Discord channel where you can chat with me all the time about various topics. See you there. Until next time.